Hi everybody, welcome to The Quick Take. My name is Bill, and today we're going to talk about
jolting tales of horror. Creepshow.
Yes, Creepshow. George Romero's, get it? Come on. If you're a horror movie, you know what George Romero wears for glasses. It's almost like this. Anyway, bad joke. George Romero's 1982 classic, man. This is a classic movie because it's so cool in the way it's put together. Written by Stephen King, so that's cool. So you got some weirdness mixed with some weirdness, and you're going to get some weirdness. But anyway, you're going to get a 5-story montage of all these different stories that wrap up in one story. Not kind of like Trick or Treat. They're all kind of different, but they all kind of share the same theme, which is revenge. Except for the lonely death of Jordy Verrill, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, anyway, let's get to this take. Okay, with every cool movie, you gotta have a cool intro, and in this intro, it's Tom Atkins and Stephen King's son, actually, who plays Billy. And Billy has a Creepshow magazine, and Tom Atkins does not like the fact that Billy has a Creepshow magazine. He thinks it's trash. So, after things are said and things are done, Tom Atkins smacks Billy around, well, just gives him a good smack, takes the book and throws it in the garbage. And that's where this movie kind of starts. The first story in Creepshow results around Father's Day. Actually, it's called Father's Day. And basically what happens is this boorish family meets once a year on Father's Day, and good Aunt Bedelia, who is old, comes to visit her father every year on Father's Day and the family because, well, she killed the father with an ashtray upside the head. Anyway, as the story goes, it's done as a narrative inside the story of Sylvia, who's the matriarch of the family, I guess, talking to Richard Harris, which is the only real known actor in this, who's the son-in-law married to her daughter, Cass. And so she's telling a story about Bedelia, and Bedelia's dad, I guess their dad, killed Bedelia's lover, and she took revenge by smacking him with an ashtray. Nobody really said anything about anything because he had a lot of bucks, and nobody wants to rock the apple cart when you got bucks, right? So they kind of just swept this thing under the rug. So anyway, when Bedelia is visiting the grave of the father, she relives all this stuff about how I want my cake, how I want my cake. That's what father says, right? And she finally loses it, and pow. Well, father wakes up, and he still wants his cake, and Bedelia pays for it. And then a little later, Richard Harris goes out looking for Bedelia, kind of strike up a conversation because he's never met her before. Doesn't work out for him either. Anyway, conclusion, very cool ending. Father, he gets his cake.
It's Father's Day, and I got my cake. Happy Father's Day.
What was really cool about this is the saturation of colors, and they use the framing like you're looking at a magazine in a lot of this stuff, like you're looking at that comic book and seeing these frames. And really the reason why that they saturated the colors so much and used that is because the MPAA was kind of on their rear end, and they had to really kind of cool it down. So to do that, they masqueraded a lot of the kills throughout this whole show with the saturated colors in the framing and in the timing and everything like that. But this particular episode was quick, the pacing was awesome, the lighting was great, and the way they drawed it out, and just a lot of quiet, and then the music, and then the quiet, and then the music, and then finally at the very climax, it was awesome. So anyway, that was Father's Day. The next story we're going to talk about is The Lonely Death of Jordy Verrill, and this one stars Stephen King as Jordy Verrill, and I think he does an awesome job in it. So Jordy is this kind of idiot farmer who's not that bright, and a meteor comes landing on his doorstep, or in his yard basically, and he has all these delusions that it's going to make him money, but he throws water on it, breaks it in half, and then he gets meteor shit all over his hand, what he says. And then all of a sudden he starts getting blisters on his fingers. And not only that, things start growing. Jordy drowns his sorrows in some good old vodka and orange juice, and then he falls asleep. And then when he wakes up, he's even growing more. So he's freaking out, man, and plus he's a little itchy, so he wants to hit the tub. And his dad appears and says, "Don't do it." Well, Jordy figures he's a goner anyway, so he jumps in the tub, and the next day, Jordy's luck finally got good because, poof, he ended himself. Then the whole shot goes out to the outside, and you see the whole county nice and green, looking like Ireland, with a forecast stating that it's going to look for a lot of rain ahead. So anyway, this is the goofiest story that's probably written, and Stephen King plays it perfectly. So I invite you to check that one out more than once because it is a good one. The next story in Creepshow is called Something to Tide You Over, and it stars Ted Danson and Leslie Nielsen. And this was before Leslie Nielsen really became a comic actor. So at that time he was playing serious roles, so it was kind of cool to see him in here playing the serious guy. Well, anyway, Ted plays a guy named Harry, and Leslie plays a guy named Richard. Now, Ted, who's Harry, is having an affair with Richard's wife, Becky. Richard finds out about it, shows up at Harry's house to confront him. And it's not like Richard loves his wife, it's just the fact that, that's one of his possessions and you can't be messing around with it. So Richard gets Harry to go with him on a trip down to the beach by playing a tape of Becky in distress. So Harry's a little worried that his boy toy there is in trouble. He relents and goes with him. Now Richard tricks Harry into going onto the beach and then gets him to get into a hole where he digs himself in. Now after he is all dug in and can't get out and pretty much incapacitated, Richard shows Harry a video of Becky, who's actually in the sand herself, buried in the sand, and the tide's coming in. And it looks like she's about ready to drown. And actually the whole thing was a plot for Richard to kill Harry and his wife, Becky, and he does so. He sets up a video camera to watch them both die, and there he goes. He goes home, he's a happy man. However, you can't keep good people underwater forever, because Richard shows up the next day and finds no evidence of them at all. The only thing he finds is some cable and an old broken down TV. Now, an old broken down TV. So that's halfway buried in the sand, but there's no trace of anything else. So Richard goes home and all's well, but he gets a couple of visitors at night, and that would be Becky and Harry, both nasty drowned, and let's just hope Richard can hold his breath. Some of the great things that jumped out in this was actually the makeup, the drowning makeup. Now, it's Tom Savini, who is the makeup artist in this, plus he plays the short garbage man at the end of the movie, but he's the makeup guy. He's also did makeup for Friday the 13th and so many others, a lot of George Romero stuff. But anyway, he said that he actually researched drowning people and looked at a lot of pictures to come up with this makeup. Anyway, the makeup is awesome. The pacing is great in this movie again, and so is the music. It all works together, just like the rest of the stories. This one's more dramatic instead of more horrifying or any horror elements in that. It's more of a dramatic, almost suspenseful, but maybe not, but it has more of a dramatic flair to it. Romero's doing a good job by keeping things a little bit different, but still following the same theme. So the next episode in Creepshow is my favorite episode, and it's called The Crate. It starts out with a janitor losing a quarter underneath these steps and then finding a crate that's labeled, like Arctic Exhibition or something like that. This episode has some pretty well-known people in it. Number one, it has Adrienne Barbeau playing the bitch Wilma, the wife of Hal Holbrook, who plays Henry. Henry always is fantasizing about killing Wilma in one way or the other. And if you haven't seen the movie, you gotta watch it because some of it's pretty funny. So anyway, back to the janitor who loses this quarter, calls the Professor Dexter, who's like Hal Holbrook's best friend, and Dexter goes to see what's going on with this crate. So when Dexter is helping the janitor with the crate, they open it up, and all of a sudden the janitor gets pulled into the crate, and we don't see the janitor anymore. So Dexter comes freaking out back to Henry's house after Wilma leaves. And he's freaking out because the janitor wasn't the only one that got killed that night. And he's going on and on about this story, about this crate and blah, 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 and people getting killed, and Hal Holbrook's just kind of looking at him funny. And then Hal Holbrook actually just kind of gives him a little tonic to settle him down. But not only does he do that, he takes it one step further. He goes to this hall called Amberson Hall, and he cleans up the mess. And in the middle, he's, kind of shoots back and forth between these two scenes of Wilma coming home reading a letter saying that Dexter got himself into some trouble with some ladies, or a lady, and they need her help at Amberson Hall. So Wilma comes actually to save him, because that's what Wilma does. Henry tricks Wilma underneath the steps to where the crate is, where he repositioned the crate, and he tries to wake up whatever's in that crate. It isn't working. But Wilma, with her giant mouth, wakes up the animal for one last meal. Henry cleans up the mess, rids the college of the animal, plus Wilma, and moves on to live a new life. I think one of the biggest things in this movie that's so cool is Adrienne Barbeau being such a bitch. She was so good at it. Just like, bah, 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 bah. I mean, when you watch the movie, it's almost like you're like going, oh God, shut up. She played it perfectly. And Hal Holbrook as the subservient husband who wishes her dead all the time actually gets his way. So I guess he wasn't that subservient, was he? The acting was great from top to bottom. This was more of a monster movie section of the movie. The colors, once again, were outstanding. The pacing, the music, and it has one of the best lines at the very end of it before Billy, or Wilma, same person, dies.
Oh, just tell it to call you Billy.
The last story in Creepshow is called They Are Creeping Up on You, and that's what it is. And it's probably one of the most talked about episodes within Creepshow besides The Crate. And it stars E.G. Marshall, who does a wonderful job as this old, nasty, mean, rotten, rich bastard. He is also a genophobe, and his name is Upton Pratt. And he's having a roach problem, a big roach problem. He's obsessed about these roaches and obsessed about cleaning. I mean, he lives in this sterile white apartment. But at the same time, he's also overjoyed about this takeover that he had with this other company, and the person that was involved in that killed themselves. So the dude's wife calls up Upton Pratt, tells him she wishes he was dead. There's some interaction between Pratt and a bunch of people also on the phone, not a bunch, but a few, and it just highlights how nasty this guy is, even when he talks to the janitor who comes up a little later. But through all of this, he's still having these bug problems, and these roaches are starting just to come on in from everywhere. It finally comes to a head where these roaches take over everything, and he ends up in a room all by himself, and these roaches are just coming from everywhere. And he finally gets overcome, has a heart attack, and at the very end of the show, after the lights come back on and you don't see a hide no hair from any bug at all in the house, it pans down to his body, and in an old practical special effect, these roaches just go from everywhere. The one thing that made this so cool was the same thing that made the last show, The Crate, so cool, was the acting. E.G. Marshall is so good in this movie. I keep calling it a movie, but in this episode, E.G. Marshall makes it. Of course, he's really the only, besides one other character that you see, he's kind of the only actor, but he is conversing with other people and stuff on the phone and that kind of stuff. But he's also showing a lot of fear and also a lot of just nasty evilness at the same time. The sterile atmosphere of the apartment set the whole mood, set the whole thing, and plus the music that they played and the music that he played on his jukebox, it all kind of worked together. The pacing was slow and deliberate, and it kept on building until finally all hell breaks loose at the end, and that's what did it for me. So the conclusion of the movie, it shows the garbage men showing up the next day in front of the house. And they find, well, actually Tom Savini finds the Creepshow magazine, and he's kind of thumbing through it. It shows a cutout of an order form for a voodoo doll in there. They didn't have Amazon back then, so you actually had to cut out the little thing, fill it out, send it in, and wait for your 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. So then you go back into the house where Daddy Atkins is in there, and he's like, they're at the breakfast table, and all of a sudden he's starting to get pain and blah, 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 blah. And it ends up showing Billy with his voodoo doll, nailing it with a pin. How dare you take my Creepshow magazine? Oh, whatever he says. Each story was different, but you could feel the same theme within them. So, except for Jordy Verrill, which I keep on referring to, they all had that revenge factor, but still, Jordy Verrill fit. It was just another one of those stories that fit like it was in a comic book. They all fit like they were in a comic book, or even now a graphic novel. This movie was fun, and it was fun to watch visually, and it was fun to listen to, and it had the fun thriller and horror elements within it. The other thing that made this movie, and I can't emphasize enough, is Tom Savini's special effects. It was all simple. This movie was simple. The elements were simple. They tied in together, and it was great. I wouldn't change a thing in this movie. Nobody should change a thing in this movie. It was awesome. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you subscribe. I hope you like. I hope you share. And even if you didn't like it, please like, subscribe, and share, because I'm a nice guy. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for watching the Quick Take, and we hope to see you soon.
You'll scream at ghastly ghouls, cringe at weird kids. Creepshow, the most fun you'll ever have being scared.